Welcome to all the bold, courageous, and powerful women tuning in to Find Your Fabulous. I'm your host, Dr. Diane, and it's time to ignite your full power. Are you ready to embrace your talents and worth and unleash the wise goddess within? I've got the information, inspiration, and revelation you need to ignite your personal power so you can stop playing small and reclaim the passion and purpose that we all hold within us. Connect with other powerful spiritual women who yearn to be fully expressed. The world needs you. Full power. Let me guide you to find your fabulous and ignite your inner goddess. It all starts now on the Find Your Fabulous show. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Diane Garrison, and you are listening to Find Your Fabulous on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience the pathway to finding your fabulous every first and third Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time and 10 a.m. Central Time, where we will have information, inspiration, and revelation to help you ignite your personal power and reclaim the passion and purpose we all hold within us. I have with me my very special guest, Rhonda Noordyk, and my beautiful producer, Emily. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
In this deep and rich episode, I will be interviewing women's financial wellness coach, Rhonda Noordyk, about her passion for empowering women, especially women contemplating or going through divorce, with financial knowledge and confidence to make the decisions that are best for them. We are also going to be unpacking her fabulous new book, Bold Beginnings, A Journey of Divorce and Financial Confidence. But first, let me introduce you to Rhonda. Rhonda Noordyk, CDFA, she's going to explain that to us, is a well-respected divorce financial strategist with over 20 years of experience. She is known internationally for her work in pioneering a path for women to navigate through the financial aspects of the divorce process. As a strategist, Rhonda helps her clients determine their next best financial move. Rhonda is also the founder and CEO of the Women's Financial Wellness Center. She's also a highly rated motivational speaker and the host of her own podcast, Disrupting Divorce: Conversations for Women. And like myself, she is a girl mom. So Rhonda, explain to me and our listeners first your credentials, the CDFA.
Yeah, so the CDFA stands for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. And, a fancy title for all the acronyms of all the pieces, right? Of like being able to look at the puzzle, the financial puzzle, as people are contemplating or going through divorce on the financial side. And really, it's interesting because when I started my business, Diane, I came out of the financial industry. I'd been there for 12 years. Long story short, built a really great following, great business. But then a couple of years ago, I figured, you know what, we're doing more on the national scale. I think it's time to go back and, add some additional credentials to the offering. And so,
Absolutely, yeah.
Formalized that certification.
And it's fun because nobody knows what it means till you tell them. So Rhonda, I usually start by asking my guest, what does being full power mean to them, and how did you step into your personal power? So it's your chance for your origin story,
Yeah.
And I read in your book that you had a challenging childhood, as did I, with a father with multiple addictions that created some financial instability for the family. And I'm just so curious how these early beginnings led to your current career and your own empowerment and healing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting, right? Because I think at the end of the day, when we look at money, we do bring a lot of attitudes and beliefs around how we show up, right? In our conversations and our interactions, how we handle our finances. And I remember, early on being a very good saver. And a lot of that came from, I believe, fear, right? And
Right.
again, not that we can't save for the sake of saving, but when I look back, it was, I'm going to save because I feel safe in that, right?
Right.
Um, and so at the end of the day, right, going through some of those pieces and ultimately then becoming an adult and saying, okay, what have I learned about my attitudes and beliefs about money that ultimately I can help other people? And I started in the financial industry in my early 20s and really basically said, hey, listen, I really don't know a whole lot about money. I know how to save. There's definitely been some biases toward, accumulating wealth or doing well for yourself or whatever that I brought with me to, starting in the financial industry. But as I talk about in my book, I had some really amazing mentors who poured into me and helped me understand some financial principles that I was able to then implement into my own life. And I realized a couple things, Diane. One of the things that I realized was, the people that I was surrounded by were people that had been very successful. They built successful businesses, but at the end of the day, it really made them more of who they already were.
Ah, right.
Like it wasn't like, oh, now we have financial success and now we went from being a really great person to a really terrible person. No, if you're a terrible person without money, you're going to be a terrible person with money. That's my
Right.
personal opinion on that,
Yes. Oh, I agree.
And so I saw people that really walked the walk and talked the talk. And that spoke to me. And I'm like, listen, there's something here. Like these people are really genuine in wanting to help people. They wanted to make people's lives better. They wanted other people to experience financial wellness, financial empowerment, financial success. And that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And I early on went all in on reading as many books as I could, learning as much as I could about money and finance. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what I found was a lot of the women that were coming through my office early on were in a very similar spot. They hadn't handled the finances, there was a lot of fear around it. And so we
Hmm.
would do women's events. And there would be standing room only. And, part of the reason I love the space that you're in today is because there's a conference center. And we would fill the conference center. It holds up to 100 people, right? And educating and pouring into women and seeing the light bulbs go on. But then what would happen is women would go home and their husband would say, oh, well, how did it go? And oh, well, don't worry about it. We've got a guy, or hey, don't worry, don't worry, you'll be well taken care of, or whatever. And women would shut down again.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't ask questions and they wouldn't lean into the tough conversations. And so they would stay stuck, really. So in 2014, I left the financial industry and opened up Women's Financial Wellness Center. And I remember when I made that transition over, and it took a while for my emotions to kind of catch up with that because,
Mm.
for all intents and purposes, a lot of my colleagues thought like the train had gone off the tracks. Like, she's a little crazy. How is she going to make any money because she's not going to be selling financial products or advice? I
Mm.
was doing consulting, particularly for women that were going through divorce. And the question was, are women actually going to pay for her help? Right. And well, of course, 10 years later, since, we know the answer to that is yes, because I'm celebrating my 10th year in an anniversary for my business in October of 2024. Um, but I'm so glad that I took that risk. I'm so glad that I, went through that transformation on my own, financial and money journey, which I do share a little bit more in the book about, um, to really be able to help other women
Yeah.
find their voice.
Yeah. Yeah. And the book, I read it. It's fabulous. And it's really, really helpful, And I think it's just interesting, that, you talk about it in your book, like your childhood led you into a whole career that then led you into helping women specifically. And, you know, the same's true for me, although you don't admit it when you're young, that, I became a psychologist because I thought my family was crazy.
Uh,
But I realized I a lot later that I was trying to create my stability by protecting myself from stuff that was all around me. And but it, it's fostered these powerful careers. It's just beautiful.
yeah.
And I can think of like my own perimenopause and burnout led to a whole second wave of powerful healing that ignited my passion to empower midlife women. I had to figure out how to empower myself. I was falling apart. And in doing so, I feel guided to these different processes and trainings and things that then made me want to share that with as many people as possible. But I was also in all of this very determined to be a powerful role model for my two daughters. And do you think being a girl mom yourself, having three daughters, has impacted your career focus as well? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think maybe there's some younger moms or moms who can relate to this, but I do remember, I mean, thinking at first like, oh, I felt this pressure. There was this resurgence of pressure for people to stay at home.
Right.
And when I had my first daughter 19 years ago. And so I did. I left my nonprofit, gig and stayed home and I was miserable. Um, I'm like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I'm pulling the covers over my head. I'm like, oh my goodness. Um, so I ended up really trying to figure out where I wanted to go next and leaned into, owning a business and teaching and doing some things that way. But um, I think so. I mean, it's been challenging, I think, in a lot of ways to balance all of the pieces. I have,
Yes.
three teenage daughters now and whatever. But I think at the end of the day, and I think we'll see it more, I'll see it more when they're adults, right? Of like one day you'll realize how great I am, and one day you'll realize
You
how
don't
much
hear it
fun.
much when they're teenagers, but I can
Oh.
promise you, because mine are in their mid and 20s, that they get much more grateful and appreciative later.
Yeah, they appreciate the benefits they have of mom owning her own business and some of the benefits that they have as far as maybe going on a vacation or work really hard and take some time to play, certainly. So that they appreciate. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, they're proud of me and they
Bet
know
they
that
are.
mom's got a big heart for people and that I'm helping them. And I think at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, being of service, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, we need to go for a break. And we've been talking with Rhonda about how she came to this beautiful business she has at Women's Financial Wellness. And we're going to take a short break and be back and really start unpacking her book. But before, oh, I want to say it again, Bold Beginnings, A Journey of Divorce and Financial Confidence. But before we break, Rhonda, how can our listeners reach out to you and get their hands onto your wonderful book?
Yes, absolutely. They can find the book on Amazon, Bold Beginnings, and also my website, wfwcdivorce.com.
Beautiful. And for all things fabulous, including coaching services and free empowerment resources, you can check out my website at fullpowerwomen.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Fabulous with Dr. Diane, my guest today, women's financial wellness coach, Rhonda Noordyk, is with me, and we are going to unpack her new book, a workbook, really, Bold Beginnings, A Journey of Divorce and Financial Confidence. So, Rhonda, you have over 20 years experience now as a financial advocate for women going through divorce, and you have your own podcast, you have your bridge program. Where did the idea for this book come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been one of those things, I was thinking about this the other day. Um, when I started in college, I actually went as a fitness management major, and in some of my core classes, which were communications, I had a couple professors that said, "Hey, Rhonda, we think you need to be a communications major." I'm like, "Excuse me, what?" Like, no. And the more that I thought about it, I had always done a lot of writing, a lot of speaking. I started speaking when I was 11. I started writing different things. Like it was, and I always got really good feedback because I knew how I don't know, maybe it's pull at heartstrings, but really connect with people, right? Like get them
Yeah.
to taking action on something. And so I actually switched my major to communications,
Mm.
the journalism emphasis. So I've written several things over the years. So about a year and a half ago, I started that journey. It ended up being like a 10 chapter book on all kinds of different things. It was heavy, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there was a lot there. And I felt like while it served as a good baseline for the process, what I really wanted to create was something that was
Mm.
what was practical, that infused some stories without it being too heavy. Because a lot of my clients, and I'm sure you see this too with clients that are contemplating or going through divorce, they don't necessarily, they don't need another 200-page book to read. They need a simple, easily accessible tool that they can throw in their purse, that while they're waiting in the line for the kids to, get done with school, or they're after sports or whatever, that they can just be thinking through some things. And at the end of the day, the transformation that I'm really helping my clients with is I want them to be more confident, because we have a short period of time to work together. And once the divorce is over and we pass the baton to their post divorce team, my work then is done, right?
Yeah.
And I want women to be in a position where they're like, you know what? I don't necessarily know all the answers, but I know where to look and I know what questions to be asking. I remember that one thing Rhonda told me, right? That is going to help me in this situation.
Yeah.
And so the word that we use as part of the book is confidence. And I'm a big acronym person, so love acronyms. So we took confidence, the word confidence, and we broke it into each of the letters stands for something. And so it's what we talked about earlier, right? Which is, hey, what is your relationship with money? And what is your story, right? So the very first thing we talk about is changing your relationship with money and owning your story. And it's so powerful. When I was considering purchasing the space that you're in now, I walked through there with somebody and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And I was looking for people that may want to consider being equity partners. And we're standing in the conference room. And I remember her saying, oh my gosh, Rhonda, I don't feel good. And I'm thinking, what's wrong? And she's like, oh no, she said, I just think about like taking on the debt. And I said, well, tell me more, because I didn't see it as debt. I saw it as an investment, right? What I learned though was that her dad was a business owner, was very successful. So it was kind of like the peaks and the valleys, the highs were high, the lows were low. She was in
Mm-hmm.
a store once with her mom, and they came out and their car had been repoed. They were
Oh
stranded at the
no.
store,
Yeah.
right? Or their house had been foreclosed on multiple times. And so for her, like that's her story was debt's bad. I don't care what you're buying, come HEL double hockey sticks, whatever, right? I'm not doing it. And I was like, hey, great, because good news for you is I'm not afraid to take on the risk. You can rent for me, right? Like that was my attitude. But again, we all bring those, right?
Absolutely.
Those stories, those relationships, impact. And so one of the exercises I take people through in this book is, listen, I want you to go through your family history,
Right.
and not for the sake of lineage, but really tell us about your grandparents. Tell us about your parents. What did they do for a living? Were
Mm.
they big savers? Were they big spenders? And of course, in my story, I share a little bit about, my story with that was my dad was an alcoholic, gambler, workaholic, all those things. But it didn't just start there. If we go up a generation, right, we look at my grandparents, very successful business owners, big savers. But we found years later, right, that my grandma actually was, purchasing lottery tickets and maybe buying some alcohol behind the scenes that nobody knew about. And so it
Mm.
wasn't, now the reason that that's important, right, is because you start to see those patterns.
Right.
And then the question is, which of those patterns that we've, that come with our history are we going to say those are good and yes, they're serving me and they're going to help me?
Right.
And then what are the things that we need to shift and change moving forward? And we have the opportunity to change those things.
Absolutely. So I can't remember, but was that the history that did that lead? No, it's a different thing. Yeah, you wouldn't think that. I just finished the book last week. Can you talk a little bit about the financial personality?
Yeah. Yeah. So the financial personality is an exercise that people can take. And I love this because it's so simple, 8 questions, right? But it really helps us understand our attitudes and beliefs about money. So there is a QR code in the book that people can take the personality quiz. And there's really 5 different personas that we score out. I want to tell people, like, it's not judgmental on where you're at. This is simply an awareness exercise. So
Mm-hmm.
we know, isn't that interesting? And now what do we do with this? So the first persona is, and we're actually going to start we're going to start in reverse. The first persona is actually somebody who is a dreamer, right? This is like, hey, Rhonda, dreaming Delilah, right? She is somebody who's hoping that Prince Charming comes. She would just rather avoid at all costs, right? Wants to live in her own reality as far as the financials. But the key thing here is that she's not really had the opportunity to really lean into her money conversations.
Mm-hmm.
She might feel intimidated or uncertain about those. And it's really, hey, don't worry, somebody else will take care of you kind of attitude, right? But their blind spot is that they might feel like the only way to move forward is to be in a relationship with somebody who's going to help take care of them.
Ah, right.
So dreaming Delilahs are tricky, and we got to get out of the dreaming mode and say, okay, what can we do to take some action to help you move forward? We have concerned Connie, right? So concerned Connie is the avoid. She's somebody who's like, listen, I don't feel confident about, having conversation with them. I'm just going to avoid them. I'm going to avoid them at all costs. And really the people that fall into this category have a hard time taking that first step, no matter what it is. They are just frozen a lot of times. But their blind spot is they might find it difficult to take the first step. But once they do, this is the best part, Dr. Diane, is that once they take that first step, then then they are like moving. It's like, just we get them over just this little hump of like being afraid, and then they're taking action, and they're realizing that it's not as scary as they thought it was, and they're being empowered.
Right.
Then we've got collaborative Carrie. Oh, Carrie. So these gals they love collaborating. They love having conversations. They love being able to understand financial issues, concerns. But here's the key thing with this one. They're not the primary decision maker. They would rather be part of the conversation, feel like they're part of the team without having to make the final call, right? So here's the tricky part for this one. As people are going through divorce, right, and they want to collaborate, and their spouse is like, that ship
Oh,
has sailed. They're still looking for their spouse, their soon-to-be ex-spouse, to weigh into conversation. Like, listen,
mm,
we get to lean into this now, and you get to make the decisions. And that's a real difficult spot sometimes for them to be,
yeah.
because they are now in the driver's seat. But it's fun too. Like, once they embrace that, look out, right? Then we've got analytical Abby. So this is the analyzer. This is I love spreadsheets. I love comparative shopping. I rarely purchase anything I can't afford, all of that kind of stuff. And the blind spot for this individual is that they get caught in the details. And sometimes they find it difficult to move beyond the data to say, okay, I have enough information now, I can make a decision, or I don't have to have every single answer before I make a move, right? Um, and then we have a sophisticated Sophia. This is an initiator. This is somebody who is extremely sophisticated in her financial knowledge. She's had experience, she's had insight, and she's been able to manage her household finances. But here's the thing about Sophia, and that is that sometimes Sophia tends to overcomplicate,
Mhm.
oversimplify, and skim that the details do matter, right? And so it's like, hey, I've been handling this, I've got this, and I appreciate the confidence. But as people are going through divorce, the details matter. And having done this for 10 years, I can tell you that there's always something new that I'm learning, and this is all I do. So, like, having an expert who can partner to help Sophia navigate through and say, yes, you've got great knowledge, and now we're going to build on that. And I'm going to help you with the specifics as it relates to the divorce process, right? So, here's the key takeaway as we kind of summarize these different personas, and that is the formula for financial confidence is quite simple. It's knowledge plus experience. Because if we have the knowledge without the experience, it's theory. If we have the experience without the knowledge, it's trial and error, right? Why isn't
Right.
this working? But when we have those two things working synchronistically together, right? In synchrony, man, is it powerful. And we've been able to see the acceleration of the confidence for women in a very short period of time. They don't have to know everything, right? They just have to know enough to get moving. And that guided experience as they're rolling up their sleeves and we're looking at their financial documents and we're taking micro moments to say, let me just take a couple minutes and explain what this means. Oh, that's what that means. And we're just layering on their knowledge and we're layering on their experience. And at the end of the day, the women leave our time together being transformed,
Oh,
being ready to
right.
take on what's next.
Beautiful. Wow. And preparing for the podcast, I read and worked through the questions like it's only fair, and it made me take a good look at my own mindsets and kind of family finances. Now, I own my own business. I have for many years, too many. And so I'm very tuned into the business finances, what I'm spending, what I'm giving, all the resources. But in my family, my husband wants to be in control of the finances, and I just kind of gave up. But, and then got kind of like too detached, right? So, but working through the questions, I was showing my husband this workbook and I said, let's talk and let's talk about this stuff because I feel like I don't have full knowledge. And, it was a very fruitful conversation. So like he's mellowed over the years and I'm more invested. And, I'm 62 now. So retirement is top of mind. So I really want to know where we have stuff. And then I asked him a question and he had to go research it. I'm like, okay, that SEP IRA I'm putting money into every month, is that in my name or in our name? And, so, oh, I don't know. So, stumped you. So, it's just
I
kind
love
of
it.
start a conversation that was, good.
Yeah.
And I love it. And we need to go into another break and we're going to unpack this book, Bold Beginnings, The Journey of Divorce and Financial Confidence, even more after the short break. But before we go, Rhonda, how can our listeners reach out to you and put up the book? So
Yes, absolutely.
and how can they get their hands on this beautiful book?
Yes, they can get their hands on the book, Amazon, Bold Beginnings will pop up this lovely cover, and wfwcdivorce.com.
Beautiful. And to learn all about my coaching services and free empowerment resources, you can check out my website at fullpowerwomen.com. And if you missed any information on the show or you just want to catch the replay, you get access to all the episodes on my website. And if you have questions, want to chat, email me at drdiane@fullpowerwomen.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Hello, we're back on Find Your Fabulous with Dr. Diane and my very special guest, women's financial wellness coach. That's a mouthful, Rhonda Noordyk. And we are unpacking her new book, a workbook called Bold Beginnings, A Journey of Divorce and Financial Confidence. So, as a psychologist, I know a little bit about neurotic beliefs and how they create problems in our lives. And I also know that most of us have some negative beliefs and limiting mindsets about money. And you talk in your own book about your own limiting beliefs and how it took you 15 years to heal your own money story. I'm still working on mine, so that's not a long time. But can you share how your journey kind of shape the way you work with women on their own money issues? What
Yeah.
you learned through your own journey?
Yeah, I love this. It's interesting because when I think about my relationship with money and how it's impacted, I think there's a couple things. One is I really am intentional about creating a space for women to be able to ask questions. And there's never any judgment like, hey, you haven't handled the finances, right? Or your husband's taking the lead, or none of that. It's like, listen, we can't do anything about that, right? Moving forward. And, hopefully they're leaning into some of these conversations like you did, Dr. Diane. Like at the end of the day, right? It comes down to leaning in, having the tough conversation. so that we can move forward with that. But for me, it really comes down to having assertive conversations and being willing to ask questions. And when I first started in the financial industry, again, having dealt with a lot of financial related trauma, I guess you could call it, really. I mean, at the end of the day, right, when you have
Right.
the uncertainty of, the paycheck and, your parent who's never around and they're creating income, but you never really see the fruits of it. And like there was just all these disconnects that I think happen. Plus, in my small community, one of the things that I mentioned in the book, which I kind of chuckle, right, as I was writing it, but it's so true. And that is that there was this misperception, like you only worked with a professional, whether it was a financial professional or an attorney, if you got in trouble. And it was like, I gotta do the launch of like the Hail Mary, like, okay, I got in trouble and like, I need help, right? And so at the end of the day, there wasn't this, hey, let's be proactive, let's plan, let's strategize, let's work with a team. That was reserved for, really wealthy people,
Mm.
right? And what I realized was the first company that I worked with when I started in the financial industry served middle America. They were really focused
Mm.
on, bringing wealth strategies that were, reserved for the wealthy to the average person. And I was like, wait a minute, this makes a lot of sense to me. And one of the things that I learned, which I do share in my book, is a little bit about something called the Rule of 72.
Right.
And I love this because the rule of 72 is basically it's a formula that was developed by Albert Einstein. It was one of the very first things I learned when I started in the financial industry. I'm like, well, this makes total sense, right? Easy, applicable, practical. And so what you do is you basically take the number, whatever interest rate you're getting on an account, and you divide that by 72, right? And so if you had, 2% interest on an investment, right? And you take 72 divided by 2 and you get 36. Well, 36 is the number of years that takes for the money to double.
Mm.
It's a long time, right? And so one of the things I mentioned, I'm just going to read the excerpt because it was just like so funny. So I was applying this principle early on in my life, and I was talking to my grandma, and she said, Rhonda, you need to go to the bank and talk to Ira about setting up an account that gets 2% interest. And I was like, first question is, who's Ira? Okay. And my second question is, how long is it actually going to take for this money to double? Well, Ira is not actually a person, right? What she meant was, Ron, I think you need to go set up an individual retirement account or an IRA. And then what I realized is, okay, well, the money that my grandma was gifting to me, if I walked down to the bank and I put it in at 2%, it was going to take 36 years for that money to double. And
Right.
I think it would have just doubled because I think it was probably like in my late teens, right? So you do the math and you're like, okay, well now it just would have doubled now. Like that's crazy. So that $1,000 gift that I got from my grandma would have taken 36 years to grow to $2,000. And with that information, let's just say I decided to go a different direction with those funds.
You back then you knew that ain't great return.
That's not going to work for me. That's way too long. But I think at the end of the day, right, it's those little practical things that we can learn and that we can immediately apply that just makes sense. And that same concept can be used in the reverse, right? If somebody's got interest on a credit card at 25%, and you do the
Right.
math and you're like, yeah, that's going to be doubling every, 2 to 3 years. Yikes. Do I want to get that paid off so I can go a different direction? So it just has been a really helpful, simple thing that I learned early on. That has been, really, really helpful, in my money story.
Very cool. Very cool. One of my negative childhood beliefs, no, actually it's two, is you have to work really hard to get anything, right? And that money is scarce. So you got to get it when you can. And, I know that has created so many limitations in me and how I've built my business and the fear of taking risk and of trying something new. And I've, in more recent years been much more of a risk taker, but in the beginning, no way. I'll say I'm going to just work 60 hours and that's how I get my money.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, as you're working with women, what are the most common Levantine beliefs that you are discovering that these women are struggling with?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're asking this question, right? Because there are a couple. I think the first one is, Rhonda, am I smart enough?
Right.
So, I mean, I've had so many women say, Rhonda, I'm smart, right? Like, yeah, girl, you're smart. Like, no question. I think there's also an aspect of shame or guilt that comes around with, I know that I should have been more involved in the finances, and I really feel bad that I wasn't.
Right.
Which again, we can't do anything about that, right? I mean, we can just, let's change that. Let's change that today, right? I mean, let's start leaning into these conversations and start gathering information and getting that stuff organized and starting on this journey of financial empowerment.
Right.
Um, and following the formula for financial confidence, right? It's one layer of knowledge and one layer of experience at a time that just really helps us. Um, so, those are probably the two biggies, I guess, that I see. Um, I think there's also fear around taking risk. That certainly is a part of it. And again, that really comes down to the family tree, looking at, the attitudes and beliefs about money that have been shaped over the years. But one of the things that kind of comes to mind also is, we weren't able to actually solidify loans as women until the late 70s
Right. Or get a credit card.
or get a credit card. And, so that's coming up on that 50-year anniversary, which, I've been saying that stat for 20 years, right? And now people are really starting to say, hey, this is a really big deal, right? But what's interesting about that is if you think about the timeline, depending on when people got married, right? So if we're in our teens, early 20s at any point during that period of time, right? Maybe that applied to us, maybe it didn't, and we didn't really notice or whatever. But then we are in the institution of marriage and we're able to get loans together, right? So we don't really know that now it's like women are coming out of that and they still have a mindset like, oh yeah, that's right. I could get a loan. I could get a credit card. I could, because they haven't really had to, I mean, not that they haven't gotten a credit card, but they haven't had to do some of these things on their own.
Right.
So I think that whole concept now, that stat or that information about, listen, we have had the ability to get loans and take out credit cards for 50 years. And they're like, really? Because I haven't been doing it. Right. And
Yeah.
so that's an interesting, something that I've been pondering as I've been thinking about that timeline. It's like, no wonder, right?
Well, because I'm always like ranting on patriarchy. 5,000 years of patriarchy, which told us, but 5,000 years of patriarchy really told us, we weren't good with math. We couldn't do numbers. We weren't good with that. And also that, we're good at caretaking people, but we'll let the man caretake of the finances, right? So even though we've had these rights for 50 years, that can't erase 55,000 years of programming and culture and ideas that have come down through all the generations. And so, I'm hoping that like our daughters are more confident with their finances, like how, like 2 generations out or something, because, even though I was born, when all the civil rights and the women's movement was happening back in 61, still so many women that I know my age just feel disempowered or helpless around money and finances. And, I just think that whether we plan or are looking at, or nobody plans, but, looking at a divorce, if your marriage is breaking up or whatever, you know, if you have that confidence, like, where do I go for help? And this is what I'm going to need to do. And you're in so much of a better spot than someone who has kind of, had the blind eyes or the hands removed relationship with the family finances. And,
Yeah.
That's why what you do with women is just so important. And I can't stress that enough from the women that I work with. I have one gal who's a VP in a bank, and she's, looking at a divorce, and she knows what she needs to do. And she's like the complete opposite of all the other women I work with, and who are just like struggling and not knowing and not sure. And, just so afraid that their husband is stacking money away in secret accounts, and I'll never be able to find it. And, and it's really important, the work that you do, and the confidence that you give women, whether it's they're going through a divorce or they're widowed, or,
Yeah.
it's it's so important because, you know, we need to learn how to manage money to be independent.
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe one of the things we can talk about when we come back from break is, putting ourselves in those positions where we have the opportunity to learn. We don't have to wait for something
Right,
bad to
for something
happen.
bad to happen.
And I have a couple examples I can share that might be encouraging.
Beautiful. All right. So, as Miranda has cued me, we're heading into another break. You are listening to Dr. Diane and the Find Your Fabulous show, and I'm here with my fabulous guest, Rhonda Noordyk, and we will be back after a short break. But before we break again, Rhonda, once more, remind our readers how to get their hands on your wonderful book and how to reach out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazon, our friends at Amazon, Bold Beginnings, right? Here is the cover. And then WFWCdivorce.com.
All right. And for all things fabulous, including my coaching services and free empowerment resources, you can check out my website at fullpowerwomen.com. We're heading in for a short break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Hello, we're back on Find Your Fabulous with Dr. Diane, and I'm here with my very special guest, women's financial wellness coach, Rhonda Noordyk, and we are unpacking her beautiful new book, Bold Beginnings, A Journey of Divorce and Financial Confidence. And just before the break, Rhonda had said that she wants to share some beautiful success stories with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I recognize that there might be people listening that, maybe they're contemplating divorce, maybe they're in the midst of it, but there might also be women that are listening, right? That are like, I'm in a great marriage, but I want to find a way that I can make it better, right? So, no matter where you're at in the continuum today, I want to encourage you to lean into finding and taking advantage of opportunities to improve your financial confidence. And I want to give you a quick example. So this was a couple years ago, probably 6 years ago. My husband and I were both kind of like divide and conquer for the day. He owns his own business. I own mine. We had three, daughters, right? Like in middle school, elementary. So it's just chaos. And I knew that I needed to get, like, we'd been talking about getting a new car. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, okay, the engine light is going on for the last time and I've had enough of it. So, right? I mean, like,
It's
right.
time. Right.
It's time. So I called him. He's like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can get away from the office today. But man, if you want to go to the dealership and go car shopping, have at it. I'm like, you know what? Yep, I'm going to do it. And my first car buying experience was not good, right? So this was not like this has been a great experience and I'm just going to like throw myself into this again. No, it was not necessarily like the thing I was on that was on the top of my list. But I knew that if I walked into the dealership and was thinking in my mind, okay, I'm going to appear as if, right, I'm a single woman who's, purchasing a vehicle. I want to test drive. I want to look at the financing. I want to do all of the things. And I did that. And I picked out what vehicle I wanted. And then at the end of the day, my husband got done with work and met me at the dealership. And we're sitting in front of the finance manager. And Tim says to them, hey, I have a question for you. And they said, what's that? And they're like, have you ever had somebody that like comes in to sign the final paperwork and they don't even know what they're buying, right? And the guy kind of looks at him and like concerned look on his face, like, oh no, did I do something wrong? Like, we moved forward with the wife without the husband's like seal of approval or whatever. And Tim starts laughing. He's like, no, 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 you didn't do anything wrong. He goes, I just was curious. I find it fascinating because I mean, she pretty much did the entire transaction apart from me signing, as a co-borrower on the vehicle. And so he didn't even know what we purchased until we walked out to the lot. And then he's like, "Oh, can I drive home?" Sure. And he gets it. He's like, "Wow, nice job, babe." And I think about that because, it's like if something happened, right, where I had to do that again, and thankfully I have a husband who affords me those opportunities to build my confidence, I would be able to go back in there again and do it, right? And so if you have those opportunities, big or small, I mean, buying my office was the same thing, right? Buying the office space that you're in now. I went to those meetings. I didn't have any, my husband didn't come with. I went in and did those by myself because I didn't want the noise. I didn't want people, giving me I wanted to just go in and say, listen, I'm happy to make a swift decision when I have all the information. And we closed on that deal, and my title company and the CPA and the mortgage person, all the people, right? The banker were like giving me high fives, like, "Rhonda, great deal," And really what they meant was like, that was awesome. I never done anything like that before. Nothing commercial real estate. I had no idea. I went into those meetings, put on some extra deodorant, and I'm like, okay, like we're doing this. And I remember exactly what I was wearing. I remember it was the middle of summer. I mean, I remember like, and I just remember saying, listen, I'm happy to make a swift decision when I have all the information, right? And I showed up to those meetings and we closed, right, on an investment property that ultimately we were able to sell and create and generated a profit. And so it was cool, right? So we got to just put ourselves in those positions and say, listen, I wouldn't even say like I was faking it. I just was like, listen, I'm just going to show up and have a conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the lines I use with my clients who are afraid to try something new is like, listen, you have 100% survival rate for every challenge you've had in your whole entire life. You're gonna get through this. You got to believe in you. And because we forget that we've handled all kinds of challenging situations in all kinds of different areas of our life. And why is money so much more complicated than, child rearing or parents getting sick or any of the other things that we've dealt with,
That's right.
over all these years of our adult lives? We do not give ourselves enough credit.
Yeah, totally. Totally. So yeah, I mean, to kind of bring that full circle, I mean, I think those are the kinds of situations that I've put myself in, being in the male dominated industry for 12 years. I mean, like
Yeah,
all of these, I kind of like just throw myself into this stuff and then I'm like, okay, here we go.
you're definitely a risk.
But it affords me the opportunity now to be able to say, listen, the stuff that I'm asking my clients to do, I've done, which I think is
Yes,
powerful, right?
integrity. Absolutely.
Yep. So I'm not
Absolutely.
asking them to do anything related to their relationship with money that I personally have not been willing to do.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. Absolutely. So that brings me to another thing I've been cogitating on, that the book covers, these topics. I love the confidence, I love the acronym, and going through all these coping skills. And I'm looking at these coping skills, and it's focused on finances, but they're the same basic coping skills I'm teaching each and every one of my clients, like needing to build a better relationship with themselves. And their confidence is the number one. Changing your limiting beliefs. Yours is about money. Mine could be about all kinds of stuff. Owning your own story, because we tell a story and we stay stuck in a story that we're a victim or incapable or whatever. And we got to bust that up by really looking at the facts of our
Yeah.
life. And that gaining that confidence in your ability to read and manage the money numbers, tuning into your core values. I don't know how many times I'm pulling out the core value sheet and we're going through the core values because, this is what you really are basing, are you in alignment with your core values? And using affirmations. I mean, every Monday I do my affirmation podcast, little video, and you know, and the assertive communication and boundaries. Every woman needs some help and support in that. I just love it. But how did you come up with these core skills for this book in terms of, I mean, I'm sure it's from all the experience that you've had in helping women with all these issues all these years, but
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I use these.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, right, it is, yeah, how do we apply these, as people are going through divorce? And I think for me, the biggest one that stood out was when we're talking about the communication side on assertive communication and boundaries.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't come up with that, right? But I knew that, listen, when I was in the financial industry, if I did not figure out how to set boundaries and enforce them, I don't even know what would have happened. I was depressed. I was overwhelmed. At the end of the day, it was, I need to figure out a way to be able to better communicate what I need and set boundaries and stand up for myself. Right. So, and I think the one area that I know that I did not know how to do well was negotiate. And so that's the end of the confidence. Negotiate always. And I think we have some misperceptions about negotiation, like, oh, I'm going to show up to the table and then, like, I'm either going to be bullied by somebody else, or I'm going to be bullying somebody else, or we're going to be getting into a fight, or, whatever. And I think at the end of the day, when we do that well, we leave those situations feeling empowered. We leave those situations feeling like we have more confidence, and we can do it with a smile, and we can do and stand firm, right? I mean, there's just such a great way. So I teach my clients, as we talk about in this book too, a method, a formula for negotiating, because I think as women, right, it's like, give me the track to run on, Rhonda. Tell me the steps, and I will do them. And guess what? It works. And then you
It
do it
does.
again and again and again. And before you know it, you're negotiating like crazy, and it's fabulous.
I can't believe it, but it's time for us to end already. And I just want to end with the quote at the end of your book: if I can improve women's relationship with money, I have empowered her for a lifetime. And that just made me verklempt. But it's so true and it's so beautiful. But before we sign off, tell us one more time how to get your hands on your book and how to reach out to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's Amazon, of course, our friends at Amazon. Bold Beginnings, right? And you can reach me at wfwcdivorce.com.
And we will, on the podcast description, have the direct Amazon link so you can get there really quick. And you can learn more about me and my coaching services and free resources at fullpowerwomen.com, or reach out to me directly at Dr. Diane at fullpowerwomen.com. I want to thank my guest, Rhonda Noordyk, for sharing such great information and inspiration with us. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to the Find Your Fabulous show. I had a wonderful time. Please join me every first and third Monday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Central, and that's 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And have a beautiful rest of your day. And I'll see you next time on October 7th, where I will be sharing my learnings and insights from a woman's retreat in Mallorca, Spain. I'm super excited. I can't wait to share with you. And until next time, go out and find your fabulous, because you deserve no less. Bye. I'm your host, Dr. Diane, and you have been listening to Find Your Fabulous. It's time to ignite your full power. Tune in every first and third Monday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific Time on Transformation Talk Radio for information, inspiration, and revelation to ignite your personal power. Connect with other bold, courageous, and powerful women who are ready to stop playing small, and the passion and purpose that we all hold within us. The world needs you, full power. To find your fabulous and ignite your inner goddess, visit fullpowerwomen.com.